Do you see brokers acting unscrupulously as being a problem in the industry? On the subject of broker transparency, can you please share with us what are the discussions that are happening, if you don't mind, and if you're hearing any, what are the discussions that's happening amongst brokers behind the scenes on the subject of broker transparency? If you were a carrier, based on the knowledge that you have right now, the broker knowledge that you have, how would you go about profitably keeping your truck loaded and keeping your truck moving? Can you give carriers and owners some tips on that? How would you go about that from your perspective? Should the broker know/care about the carrier's cost of operation?
Okay, I'll answer that as far as I'm concerned. No, I don't know, and no, I am not concerned. If there are carriers that think that brokers are so bad, if brokers are causing such a problem for them and their business, why do they use brokers? Again, I put a lot of responsibility on business owners, as truck drivers and as freight brokers. It's your responsibility to take care of your business. I started to understand a little bit better. At least this is the understanding I developed was, it's not the truck driver who makes the money in this business. It's people who provide services to the truck driver who makes the money.
I get that.
I'm like, oh.
All right, family. So before I get into this conversation with Mr. Brandon Scott, I want to let you guys know a few things. The first thing I want to let you know is I lack knowledge. I'm going to let you know that up front. I lack knowledge in this area, in this realm of brokers and carriers and the issues that they have with their relationships, because I don't really work with brokers like most carriers do. I don't work with brokers in that capacity. So I'm letting you guys know this up front because, while you could legitimately argue, hey, Mr. Helpful Trucker, you really don't have any business talking about this subject because you just acknowledged that you don't know about it. The reason I feel totally comfortable making this video for the community and having this conversation with Mr. Scott is because I lack knowledge in this area. That's the same reason, okay? So it's like I am an owner. I am a truck driver. I've been out here for 7 years. I understand trucking, at least somewhat, and I understand economics. So because of those things, and you combine that with the fact that I don't work with brokers, it means that I'm not emotionally involved in this subject. And I'll let you guys know, you carriers and owners know, that when I listen at some of the videos and some of the complaints on the carrier end about brokers, what I personally hear is a lot of emotion. And so that's not what you're going to hear in this interview, because I have no dog in this fight. So because of that, I actually feel that my channel is the perfect channel to introduce or be talking about this conversation to the community, because I'm not emotionally involved. This is going to be a very logical based conversation. That's the first thing I want to let you guys know. Second thing I want to let you know is about Mr. Brandon Scott's willingness to come here and have this conversation with me, with an owner on the channel. I want to personally applaud him. Okay, so I don't want any of you guys to go down in the comments if you don't like anything that he says. I don't want you guys to be disrespectful. Mr. Scott was nice enough to come here and have a conversation. I've gone to his YouTube channel and I've heard him say several times on several of his videos that he encourages conversations around these topics, and around this subject. So I want you guys to be respectful to Mr. Scott. Please pay attention to what he's saying. Please try to get something from what he's saying, and please don't be disrespectful if you happen to disagree with something that he says, or if you don't understand something that he says. And the third thing I want to let you know before we get started is, if you are interested in learning more about how to become a freight broker, this is not something that Brandon Scott has asked me to plug. I'm plugging this because I see Brandon Scott's channel, his YouTube channel, as an extremely helpful resource for the trucking community, for those that maybe want to inquire more about becoming a freight broker, or for the carriers that want to know more about how things operate from the broker side. I think his channel is extremely valuable. So if you're interested in knowing more about either one of those subjects, I suggest you go over and check out his channel, Brandon Scott. So Brandon, welcome to the channel, boss. I'm so honored to have you here. I appreciate you being willing to come spend some time with us this morning.
Absolutely. It's my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. Looking forward to hoping to provide some value to the channel.
Absolutely, absolutely. So look, before we get started, can you tell me and the viewer a little bit about who you are, how you were introduced to this industry, how you got started, how long you've been a freight broker? Just tell us a little bit about yourself before we get into this.
Okay, certainly. So I'm Brandon Scott. I started a freight brokerage business and a trucking business back in 2015. Started those business basically at the same time. The trucking business was a dump truck business, and we started the brokerage. So after running both of those businesses for about 1 year, we decided to get rid of the trucking side of the business and run exclusively the brokerage. And when I'm starting any business, I'm starting a business based on my ability to go in that business and be able to earn revenue, right? So I looked at both of those businesses after being in it for about 12 months and decided, okay, we're going to sell the truck and focus exclusively on the brokerage. So we've been brokering freight now since 2015. I was introduced to this business by my business partner, Dal Muhammad. He introduced me to the business. I didn't have a whole lot of interest in trucking, didn't even know what freight brokering was, but we were in real estate at that particular time, doing relatively well, but we also noticed that we wanted to make money more frequently. We were buying properties and rehabbing those properties and putting them back on the market, and that takes time to make money. Well, we wanted an opportunity to make money on an everyday basis. So that's why we decided to come into trucking and freight brokering, ultimately decided to be exclusively in brokering.
Real quick, family, for the last few weeks, I've been going live with my audience here on the channel every Friday night at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and I really enjoy it. I plan to stay as consistent as I can with that in the future going forward. Now, obviously, the edited videos, like the one you're watching right now, I'm going to continue with those. That's where my channel gets most of the search traffic from and most of the views and ad revenue from. But in my opinion, there's really nothing like the interaction and engagement that is available only in a live stream. If you're not a subscriber of the channel though, then you're not being notified when we're live here. And I don't leave my live streams public. I rip out the valuable parts, edit it, and re-upload those videos. So if you miss these live streams, then you're missing out on the opportunity to be able to really engage and interact with me and with the audience here on the channel. So before you click off of this video, if you haven't already, consider subscribing to the channel so you'll be reminded. You'll get a notification right on your phone whenever we're live. And it doesn't matter whether you're new in trucking or if you're a veteran, you've been around for a while, or if you're just thinking about getting in trucking. I normally come up with some pretty valuable topics to discuss in the lives. Consider subscribing to the channel, family, and I look forward to seeing you on the next live stream this Friday at 9 p.m. Eastern. Now let's get back to the video. Got you. And if you don't mind me asking before we get started, how did the YouTube thing evolve?
Good question. So when I first started the brokerage, I said, hey, you know what? I want to start a YouTube channel. I want to start a YouTube channel to share my experiences, my ups and downs with an audience, kind of just as you know, somebody to listen to my thoughts, listen to all the stuff that I was going through in the business. And started that YouTube channel, and it just started to grow. Started to grow up based off of me sharing what was going on with my everyday walk as a freight broker. And I think also, I would also say this, I think it's a good idea for truckers, other freight brokers to start YouTube channels, man, because, it's just we're living in the world. In this era right now is the social media era, right? It's a lot of, money that can be made in social media. So I use YouTube now as another stream of income. It allows for me to make money and supplement my brokerage. So, YouTube is, something that we commit a lot of time to because, it's a very, very valuable tool to help you grow your business.
Absolutely. Well, again, before we get started, I just want to applaud you for what you're doing over there on your YouTube channel. As a fellow YouTuber, I know what it takes to grow a channel, to keep an audience engaged, to grow an audience, to keep coming up with creative topics and ideas, to share with an audience. I understand what it takes to be able to do that. So as far as I'm concerned, I don't care what people say about freight brokers, man. The industry needs more people like you. All right, I absolutely want to applaud you for that. So.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Absolutely. So let's jump right into it. I want to get started with something I touched on a minute ago. Generally speaking, I'm talking about what I hear from owners and from carriers online in relationship to how they feel about brokers. Generally speaking, what I hear, I don't know what you hear, but I'm gonna ask you about that. But what I hear is it seems that overall carriers and owners give brokers a hard time. They give freight brokers and load brokers and brokerages in general a hard time. Can you tell me from your perspective why that is? Am I just seeing that, or why is that?
Well, at least on social media, I know you notice you said you hear that on the internet, right?
I hear it
And that's
offline
where
sometimes too. I hear it
that's where
offline sometimes too.
I got you. I generally hear that on social media, right? I've never had a case where I've worked with a truck driver and he's come back and we've had issues about the way that we've worked together. I've never had issues with that. But now on the other side, I do understand that there are obvious issues when I post videos about, trucker and broker relationships. That obviously gets a lot of feedback, right? And different people have different opinions about that. I think what it ultimately boils down to is that when there is a person that's paying you, you can always find issue with that person or the company that's paying you, right? You always think for some reason that you're being shafted, you're not being treated fairly, you're not being paid fairly. So the broker is in the middle of that transaction and the broker is paying the carrier. So I think that causes issues sometimes. Naturally, I think you're naturally inclined to have issues with the person in that position sometimes. Now, the other side of it is some carriers, some owner operators have been taken advantage of by brokers. So they have a sour taste in their mouths about what happened during that transaction. So there are definitely things that go on every day in this business. And I don't think it happens from the vast majority of, good freight brokers out there. I think that there's a small group of people, smaller group of people that cause issues, and brokers get a bad name because of that. But now I think that there are unscrupulous characters on both sides, and the broker side and on the trucker side. But, I think that basically, is what the gripe is. And especially when we start talking about rates, right? If I'm, a broker and I'm saying that the rate is X and you're the trucker and you think that that's a low rate, there's a disagreement sometimes there. People see it different ways. But I kind of look at it as just, hey, I'm going to come to a carrier and we're going to negotiate. I understand that he's in business, I'm in business, and we are both trying to do the best for our entity. I have my best interest at hand. You have your best interest at hand. We come in and we negotiate and we settle somewhere in the middle and we continue to work together, right? I think that's basically what it boils down to. But a lot of emotions get tied into that. And yes, you do have carriers that have some grievances, some gripes with brokers and vice versa. I think it works both ways.
All right. Well, here's what I'm thinking as you're saying that. We're having a conversation about brokers, and now you mentioned unscrupulous characters or bad actors on both sides. Look, bro, this conversation ain't about getting on carriers, okay? We getting on brokers in this conversation. I'm just kidding with you. I'm just kidding with you. We're gonna come back and touch on that in a little while. Things that maybe carriers may be doing on their side as far as trying to get the broker. But I'm gonna push a little bit deeper into the bad actors on the broker side, if you don't mind. Do you see brokers acting unscrupulously as being a problem in the industry? Again, when I'm listening to a lot of truckers and carriers, and I will say this, what I'm asked about now specifically is something I'm hearing online on YouTube. I'm hearing truckers say that brokers are the main problem in the trucking industry right now. So, do you see brokers acting or bad actors on the broker side being such a huge problem in the industry, or is it something that you would say, well, of course, there's bad apples in every bunch, but it's not something that it's not it's not consuming the industry like the carrier is saying that it is. What's your perspective on that?
I don't see brokers as being a huge problem at all. Matter of fact, I don't see brokers being a problem. I see brokers being a part of the solution. But I would say this: if there are carriers that think that brokers are so bad, if brokers are causing such a problem for them and their business, why do they use brokers? Why would you use a broker if he caused you the type of issues that you're talking about, right? Now, I think what it boils down to is that the vast majority of brokers and carriers get along relatively well. I think that's what happens in most cases. But sometimes you're going to have issues, and again, that causes disagreements, right? That's going to cause disagreement between you and that carrier. But as far as a broker being that the broker is the problem, I don't see that as the case at all. I just see that as, again, just some isolated issues where you have bad actors that are doing bad things and causes, kind of a black eye for everybody involved. But I just don't see that as being a big problem because, again, carriers have the choice to work with brokers. Nobody's forcing a carrier's hand to work with a broker. So he chooses that relationship for a reason. I think that because that relationship has value to him. I think he chooses that for that reason. Because if he didn't have value in it, if it was something that he could do on his own, then it's very likely that he wouldn't use a freight broker.
I understand that. I believe I understood exactly what you just said, but I want to rephrase the question just a bit, just to clarify your point, if you don't mind. So like, this you may or may not be able to relate to this, but like back in the days, if you got a spot, if you got something going on, and it don't have to be nothing, illegal. It could be something totally legal, right? You don't want people blowing up your spot. You don't want people making too much noise on your block. You don't want too many people making too much noise on your corner, specifically if you're doing something illegal. But even if you're doing something legal, people is like, man, we don't want the fuzz around here. We don't want you to call attention to what we got going on. And again, that's whether we're doing something illegal or whether we're doing something illegal. We just don't want to make too much noise. And that's kind of the scenario that I'm talking about. Like, do you see brokers acting unscrupulously in that way? Okay, I see some of the things that brokers are doing. I hear some of the things that carriers are saying that is legitimate. Are you looking at those things and saying, okay, these guys on my side, they need to stop because they're gonna call attention to us? Or again, is it that, everybody's doing their thing, but it's not that much of a concern to me? They're not making the spot hot. It's not that, pervasive in the industry, unscrupulous brokers. So that's kind of, I want to ask that question kind of again and rephrase it. Do you see the unscrupulous brokers being, are they causing too many problems in the industry, or is it like, that ain't that big of a problem, man?
Well, it sounds like, if you listen to social media, it sounds like, yeah, they causing some serious issues.
If you listen to social media, yes, I could agree. This is what I hear.
Right. Yeah. It sounds like some serious issues. And even when we start thinking about the OOIDA and SBTC's argument, Small Business Trucking Coalition, they're arguing on behalf of the small trucker. And, their argument basically is the playing ground is not fair. It's not a fair playing ground. Right. I don't see it that way. When I look at it, and of course they're arguing from the truck drivers' best interest, but from when I see it, I see it as a playing field where we're both called on to be creative, called on to compete in order to win in this business. I mean, that's traditional capitalism. That's how it works. So I don't see it as that, but now I can certainly see if how other people may see it differently. If you're a truck driver, you stand on a different side of the fence than I do, you might have a different point of view. So that's why I say I'm open to different point of views on the topic. But at the end of the day, when we talk about unscrupulous characters, I'm not out really paying attention to brokers to see what it is that they're doing and saying, oh, this is bad. I do know that I want to operate my business a certain way, right? I want to operate my business as a stand-up business, as a straightforward business, doing honest business with my carriers, with my shippers, but at the same time trying to win for my business, right? So I don't really pay a whole lot of attention to what other brokers are doing when it comes down to bad activity.
Got you. You just touched on something I want to ask a little bit about. You spoke about what you do focus on, which is how you operate, and I want to just ask real quick. I've always said that when an individual is in a business, in an industry, I call it an angle. You need to have an angle. An angle is a leg up, basically. It's a way of doing things that other people might not be doing, essentially to separate yourself from the crowd just a bit. If you don't mind, how do you operate differently? And maybe that's not the right question, but kind of what is your angle? How are you? What are a few of your methods and tactics as far as setting yourself apart in your industry?
Okay. Well, number one, when we start talking about setting myself apart, we're talking about a service that a freight broker provides, right? So my service is going to be, we focus on full truckload, less than truckload, multi-picking, multi-drops. We're going to focus on different types of freight movement. We're also going to have excellent customer service. We're also going to focus on last minute freight. We're going to move last minute expedited freight for several reasons. But number one, because when you can help a shipper out in a situation like that, you're likely to get more of their freight, right? So the service is what's going to set me apart, what I am, designing so that it sets me apart from the next broker or the truck driver, right? But when it comes down to me and how I operate my business, what I am focused on, number one thing that I am focused on in a business is how to earn a profit, right? I think that you have to be intentional about earning profit, right? Because if you're not, then you just make money. You don't earn profit. So I'm intentional about earning profit. I'm intentional about building relationships with shippers. Because what I understand is that in this business, the gold, the GOLD in this business is freight. And as a freight broker, I have to command a certain amount of freight to get attention of carriers. Once I have that freight and I have control of that freight, now I want to build relationships with carriers, trusting relationships. Number one, they're going to know that I'm going to give them the information that they need to make a decision on the freight that we're discussing, right? I'm going to make sure that carrier gets paid and get paid on time. And we're going to do good business together. When I say good business, what I mean by that is I have a respect for you and your business and understand that you have an agenda. You have your best interests at hand as a business owner, and you understand the same about me. And we do good business together. If there are issues, if carriers and I have issues, I want to discuss those issues so that moving forward, we can eliminate those types of things going forward. But this business to me is all about building relationships. I also like for my carriers to understand too, that sometimes I'm going to have lanes that are not going to be the best paying lanes, right? But then there are going to be other times where we have some lanes that are paying great because that's how the business works. I like for my carriers to understand that we are competing. We're competing with other carriers. We're competing with other brokers to get control of these lanes. And sometimes what comes with that is cost cutting, right? That's just how it goes. Yes, we want to be competitively priced all of the time, as much as possible. We want to be competitively priced, but we will have lanes that are going to be discounted sometimes because we want to keep freight. We want to keep control of freight, and it causes for that sometimes. So some of the lanes that I have are not always going to be the best paying lanes. Some of the lanes I have are going to be great paying lanes. But I know that in order to attract carriers, I have to have good paying lanes more often than not.
I understand that. let's go a little bit deeper on that. I'm gonna ask you two questions here. I'd like you to address it from both perspectives. One, do you know what it costs a carrier to move a load, to move from point A to point B? I'm asking that because, again, in the online community, from carriers and from owners, I've heard them say several times, brokers have crappy rates. Don't they know what it costs to move a load? It costs out here. I hear carriers saying that. The broker acts like he don't know what it costs me to move my truck. So the first question is, do you know what it costs a carrier, an owner, to move the truck, as far as, all of their costs, their fuel cost, and their short-term stuff, which is fuel, and their long-term stuff, which would be, maintenance. Do you know that? And the second part of that question is, and you can address this from a broker's perspective at large, should the broker know / care about the carrier's cost of operation?
Okay, I'll answer that as far as I'm concerned. No, I don't know, and no, I am not concerned. I expect that the carrier knows what his costs are. I expect the carrier knows where he needs to be in order to be profitable on a particular lane, because that's his business. So I look at it like this. I'm going to mind my business, and I would expect carriers to do the same. Mind your business. When you're minding your business, you know what your costs are. When you're minding your business, you know where you need in order to be profitable in lanes. So that is you're the mind, you're the brain behind that business. You understand the numbers behind that business, and I understand the numbers behind mine. So when we come to the table, then you know where you want to be. And if you know that, then you're very likely to get closer to that number than if you don't. And I think that's what happens sometimes is, I hear those comments. I see those comments about brokers knowing what carriers, how much overhead we got, and you don't have any overhead as compared to what I have, and I think that just how I look at that is that says, okay, I chose a different business than you. I chose a business that was more aligned with what I wanted to achieve, a business that didn't have as much overhead. You chose your business for whatever reason you chose it for. But when you make that choice, you assume the responsibilities that come with the business. And it is not my responsibility to know what the costs are for a carrier to operate. That's his responsibility. It's how I look at it.
I understand that. So, I want to ask you a little bit more about what you just now said, because again, not thinking emotionally, trying to keep it logical. When I'm hearing an owner, a carrier, a driver say brokers don't know or don't care, either one, how much our cost of operation is. Our cost of operation is, higher than theirs. They're sitting at home. They don't have all the expenses that we have. And I hear the carrier complaining about that. When I hear that, I look at that almost like a person is complaining about wintertime. It's like what I hear is a person complaining about the way things are. So you mentioned earlier that when you started off in this profession, you started off on the trucking side and the brokerage side, and after looking at both of them for a year, you chose the broker model for a particular reason. Obviously, you were looking at the numbers. So, I don't know what it takes to start brokering loads. I don't know what it costs to start a brokerage. And when I'm hearing carriers online talk about unscrupulous brokers being such a huge problem in trucking, when I'm hearing carriers and owners online saying or asserting that all of the brokers and brokerages are unscrupulous, when I hear this, again, thinking logically, I don't know what it takes to start a brokerage, okay? The first thing that comes in my mind is, well, it would make sense that if you know that as a carrier, as an owner, if you know that, people that act with integrity are lacking, if you feel that way, that's lacking on the broker side, and you're a carrier, and you've already acknowledged that the carrier has more overhead than the broker, the first thing that pops into my mind is, well, why doesn't the carrier just start a brokerage? But again, I don't know what all goes into that. And that kind of leads into what you was talking about earlier as well, as far as, drivers and owners complaining about the brokerage, the broker, but at the same time still using them. Because on one note, when they're complaining about them, they're kind of indicating that there is no value there. But every time they set a load up with the broker, they're acting as if it is value there. So if to me, it just seems that if I've identified that they're brokers that act with integrity are lacking on the broker side, not saying that they are or that they aren't, but if I feel that way as a carrier, and I know the benefit of using a broker because I always use one, I would look at just delving into that business model. Like I said, wintertime is not going to change for you just because you don't like it. You can either adjust to it or not. So speak on that for a little bit. I know that's kind of weird. You're on the broker side. I'm on the owner side. But is starting a brokerage that difficult? Why aren't there more carriers looking on that side saying, man, I'll just go over there and operate with integrity. And if there's nobody on that side operating with integrity, trucking is supply and demand, I'll attract all of the customers. How come carriers aren't doing that more so, in your opinion?
And how I see it is, I don't think it's difficult at all to start a freight broker business, right? It's a very easy business to get into, right? It's an easy startup. Trucking is not a hard startup. It's a relatively easy startup. The barrier of entry to be able to get into either of these businesses is not really difficult, right? But the day-to-day operation is something different. The day-to-day operation of a business is entirely different than saying, I want to get started, right? And one of the skill sets that's required as a broker, either you're going to acquire this skill set or you're going to be willing to learn it. And that is being a good salesperson, right? And being a salesperson is, one of the best professions in the world when you're good at it. But you have to commit and dedicate yourself over a period of time to be good at it, right? And trying to drive a truck and be a salesperson where you're going out and getting your own freight, that is a serious, serious challenge. Trying to operate two businesses at the same time is a serious challenge. It's hard enough to build one business successfully, let alone trying to build two at the same time. So it's like a monster, by itself. And then when you add that double-headed monster, I think it's even more difficult, and most people are not equipped to handle that, right? So sales is the biggest thing in freight broker. That's the biggest part of freight broker, and that's what most people don't want to do. Most people don't want to call up customers every day and be told no over and over again. They don't want to go through that process, so they give the broker that responsibility of getting freight, and they go to the freight broker and get that freight. So that's what I more so look at it as, is that easy to get into, but it's a different game to operate that successfully over time.
Yeah, I understand that. That made perfect sense. And it definitely, like you accentuated just now, sounds like a different set of skill sets. That's interesting too, because I've spoken with carriers before, and I've asked a very similar question to the one that I've just asked you. Man, if you don't like how brokers are conducting themselves and you see it as such a huge problem, why not just start, brokering loads? Why not just start a brokerage, right? If you've already acknowledged that, you feel that they make more money on the deal. So it's like, why not just do that yourself? And when I've spoken with carriers, generally speaking, what I hear is something that sounds like, I don't want to do all of that. I don't want to deal with people like that. And, it's interesting, man. I've been a truck driver now for 7 years. And again, a lot of the truckers that I deal with, they'll say things like that. Like they don't really like dealing with people. I've seen that as a benefit in certain instances of being a truck driver for the last 7 years. During the pandemic, it's like, we don't have to deal with people. You know what I mean? When all of the places started shutting down and you couldn't actually, when you're dropping off a load, you can't go in the facility during the pandemic. They got a note on the door and an envelope to drop your paperwork in right there because they're trying to, mitigate people contacting or coming in close contact with each other. So a lot of truckers saw that as beneficial. Like, we don't have to deal with people. And aside from the pandemic situation, I've heard carriers say that before. I like not having to deal with people, right? And I get that. But I've been in sales before. I was in sales for 15 years. And I remember one of my mentors in sales, he taught me, he said, money comes from people. right? And we not in, we don't want to get into religion or God or any of that stuff. We know where all your blessings come from. Got it. But every piece of money that you ever got, a person gave it to you. Every check you ever got, a person signed it. So what I'm saying is, reflecting back on that lesson that my mentor taught me in sales, it's like truckers allow themselves to get caught up in a catch-22, basically. They allow themselves to love the solitude of trucking, but I would argue that the more you're alone and the more you're not working with people, you're gonna lose the desire to deal with people. And generally speaking, I feel, being that money, in fact, does come from people, if you don't want to deal with people, you're kind of shutting yourself off to being able to get money, because that is where money comes from. So, like I said, I've thought about that topic about truckers before, man. I'm like, something, I can't let myself get caught up in the trap of enjoying not dealing with people, because I want to make some money, man. You know what I mean? So however I'm going to do, whatever I'm going to do, it's going to include dealing with, managing, and working with people. You ain't going to get around that if you really want to be able to make money. So I just wanted to say that, but let me go on to the next question. I want to ask.
Let me say this.
Absolutely. Go ahead.
Let me say, I think that's a beautiful way of putting it. That's a beautiful way of explaining it. And it also lends to the fact that when we think about independence, everybody is striving to be independent. But when we look at the world and how the world is configured, we live in an interdependent world, kind of just like you described. Every piece of money you've ever gotten has been exchanged. You've gotten it from somebody, right? So as a freight broker, what would I look like saying that I'm not a people person? What does it look like for me to say, I don't want to deal with people, when everything that I do is about dealing with people as a freight broker? Everything that I do is about building relationships with people. So when someone tells me, hey, I'm not a people person, well, either you're going to be a people person or you're in the wrong business. That's just how that goes.
Makes sense. Makes total sense. So let's go a little bit deeper. And this might be a weird question for you to answer, because one, because you are on the broker side, and two, you already acknowledged that, looking at both business models, you chose not to go with the driver's side. So this might be a weird question for you to answer. But if you were an owner operator, if you were a carrier, based on the knowledge that you have right now, the broker knowledge that you have, how would you go about profitably keeping your truck loaded and keeping your truck moving? Can you give carriers and owners some tips on that? How would you go about that from your perspective?
So number one, I would look at it to come in to really understand the business and how it works. How does this business model earn revenue? Once I start to understand that, then I want to see how I fit into that business model. As a truck driver, one of the main things that usually causes, a truck driver problems is the money problem, right? That's with any business. The money usually comes up to be a problem at some point. So I think it's about focusing on that part of the business, understanding this part of the business, the profit part of the business, right? And when I take a look at that, when I start to look at profit, one of the first things that pops to my mind is cost. What is it costing me to operate this business? And where are the costs that I can cut, right? Because we already know that when we look at a small business, taxes is usually probably one of your biggest, if not your biggest expense, right? So we want a good CPA on our team to help us manage our tax problem, help us to pay less taxes. The next thing that I think that we should look at is cutting cost. When we say cutting cost, I mean that, for example, if you say that the broker has no value, then that's a cost that you should cut. Or at least maybe you should use the broker occasionally and build direct to customer relationships. Why? Not because there's no beef between me and a broker, but because it's necessary for me to cut costs to make more money, right? So we're dealing with the business of it, not the personal side of it. To me, everything is about business, right? So when I start looking at my cost and cutting cost, now I want to look at other ways to make money. And I think that this is probably one of the biggest issues that I see when it comes to truck drivers is, at least the friends that I have in truck driving, is a lot of times that they only have one source of income, and that's the truck driving business, right? And you're expecting this one source of income to take care of you and your lifestyle, to take care of everything that you need it for. This one source of income is going to do that. And when that source has problems, when you start to make less money, it's a problem for you. So I think it's a good idea to, once you get one source of income and you're generating that income consistently, it's time to look at other ways to make money, right? It's time to look at something else. How can I make money, where I don't have to spend so much time doing it? For example, you can have a YouTube channel making a 4 or 5 minute video every other day and build a revenue stream that way. Just personal, I made $32,000 in revenue last year on my YouTube channel, right? So we understand sometimes my brokerage is going to have financial issues. We're not always going to make the same amount of money every single month, but we have plugs, things where we can plug in and say, okay, well, I can grab a source from here this month, right? Because we have other streams coming in. So I think it's important for a trucker to have, we hear that multiple streams of income, but focus on the one first, and then get you another stream of income coming in that will supplement that income. So, and, when I really look at that, being intentional about that is the key. A lot of people say they come into business for certain things. Oh, they come into business because they want to see the country. They come into business because they want to be their own boss. All of that is okay. That's cool. I came into business to make money. I came into business to make profits. That's what I came in for, brother. I didn't come in to play games. I didn't come in to act as if I'm the big boss. I came in this business to figure out, how do you earn revenue? How do you earn profits? If I can see a path to that, then I put my head down and I go to work. So I think it's being intentional about what it is that you're doing and paying attention to the money. You see, a lot of times, and I'm sorry for going on about this, but since we're just talking, there's an accounting portion to this game, and a lot of times, truck drivers don't pay attention to that. A lot of times, people that are in my circle, they're just about making money, but it's not about the money that you make. It's about what you are able to keep. That's the game that we're playing, right? And when you don't have good accounting in place, if you don't have a CPA, if you don't have someone that you're sitting down with, a bookkeeper that you're sitting down with, and on a monthly basis to figure out where your money is going, where your profits are going. How often do you look at your profit and your loss statement, right? How often do you look at your balance sheet? How often are you looking to set up a 401k for yourself? Because as a business owner, I have to take care of, I'm responsible for that, right? So we need to be intentional about being profitable as a business. That's how you become profitable as a business, in my opinion.
That's interesting. As you're talking, I'm thinking about some of the conversations and discussions I've heard online from carriers and from owners, and what I'm thinking about is the lines that I'm hearing where carriers and owners are, they're upset about how they, feel that they're not making the money. Like, everybody's chopping off and cutting off pieces of their money here and there, which don't leave a lot left for them. But then I'm hearing them talk about how, truckers are the backbone of the country and we keep the country moving, and I don't know why I'm thinking about that right now, but as you're admitting forcefully and deliberately, I am here to make money. To me, I don't know, man. Truckers, carriers, I know you guys probably pissed off with me as I talk about you guys, but when you're talking about the money not being there and you're following up with, man, we're the backbone of America. To me, now you're getting into the emotional weeds. And when you keep it in the lines of money, profit, I'm here to make money. So either I'm making it or I'm figuring out a way to make more or I'm figuring out a way to do things differently so that I'm not spending as much. To me, it's a much less. It's not an emotional discussion. Numbers, zeros and ones is easy. It add and subtract, multiply, divide. There's no emotion involved in what is 2 plus 2 or what is 3 plus 3. But there is emotion involved in why are they treating us like this? We're the backbone of America. So as you're talking about that, I appreciate you being willing to say, man, I'm here to make money, because it sounds like you, and I feel this way as well. I don't really have a problem admitting on my YouTube channel, I'm not making videos just because I'm here to make money. But I want people to understand that when they're dealing with me, I understand what it takes to make money, which is you got to be willing to give before you get. You got to be willing to pay it forward before you can expect anything to come back. You got to be willing to give value before you can expect value to come back in a different form. So while I don't mind telling my viewers and my subscribers I'm here to make money, I expect them to also understand that, well, when he says that, that means he's deliberately going to give us something of value. People that sold me this hat, they didn't make it because they like making hats. They made it because they wanted to make money, pure and simple. You know what I mean? So but they understood, let's make a hat that's worth more than what we're asking for. Then it's an even value exchange. So I'm kind of like you. I don't have a problem admitting to people I'm here to make money, but I also want people to know that I understand that to invoke that process of making money, I need to be offering value. So I feel like, hey, if I'm on the outside of that looking in, I want to deal with this guy because he's let me know he want to make money, but I also feel like he know I ain't gonna give him none unless he giving me some value, unless he giving me something. So I definitely appreciate you being willing to admit that or to speak on that.
It's all about value. It's all about you exchanging. Someone gives you your time and you give them value in return, right? Because if you're making videos, people aren't going to watch the videos unless they see a reason to watch your videos, 100%. Right? So you're not going to make any money if you can't attract people to your channel. Exactly. And you got to give away, like you say, a whole lot. You got to give away. I got over 1,000 videos on the channel almost. It's a lot of videos on that channel, man, where we started a long time ago in 2015 making videos and weren't making any money. Right. So, there's a lot of giving of your time before any money starts to come in. But, to me, it's something that you should be intentional about.
That's the part that I wanted. That's the part that I wanted to focus in on right there. Like, you should be intentional about it. And when I hear truck drivers with that discussion of, they're complaining about the money, but then it's like, they shouldn't treat us like this. We keep the country moving. All that may be true, but again, that's emotional stuff. At the end of the day, it's the money, and the winter is the winter. It's gonna be cold in the winter. If you don't like the winter, you can either get a summer house, you know what I mean, or you can, like you can stack up for the winter, but you're not gonna change it just because you feel that you don't like dealing with the wintertime. So that was the point that I was trying to bring out right there. Let me ask you this. On the subject of broker transparency, can you please share with us what are the discussions that are happening, if you don't mind, and if you're hearing any, what are the discussions that's happening amongst brokers behind the scenes on the subject of broker transparency? It makes sense to me that it would make sense to me that a broker would be against broker transparency. That makes sense to me. But are there any brokers that don't care whether it's enforced or not? In other words, are there any brokers out there that are like, man, if they enforce it, we got to show our records. I don't care. They're going to affect one thing, or the other. Or is everybody on that broker side against broker transparency?
No, I'm sure you have people out here. I see people come in the comment section on my videos that say, "Hey, I'm okay with it. If they want us to share it, I'll be okay with it." I think a lot of times those are people that own trucking companies as well as brokerages, and they're doing way more work on the trucking side than they are on the brokerage side, so they have that opinion. I'll share with you what the TIA. The TIA is the Transportation Intermediaries Association, right? And they are like a big freight brokerage association. And they went and they filed a petition on behalf of freight brokers, right? And that petition was filed saying that they removed the requirement that freight brokers have to share those transaction documents. Well, The FMCSA came back and denied that petition and said that we're not going to grant this petition. Okay, so here's how the TIA responded. They said, we've got a situation where hundreds of millions of dollars of freight is being stolen by fraudulent companies in the trucking market. The NHTSA is telling us that truck crashes are up 10%. A majority of the trucks on the road go without safety rating. It's a complete failure by the FMCSA when it comes to safety. Instead, they want to initiate a rulemaking that involves private commercial contract negotiations. We're kind of dumbfounded, right? Now, what they're saying there is, with all of the other problems that are going on in the industry, you want to focus and make rulemaking around this idea that brokers it should be a requirement that brokers share their transaction documents, a private contract. Now, you're saying a private company has to come and share his documents with another company. That's basically what the TIA is saying. They're kind of dumbfounded by that, is what they say. Well, how I look at that, as a small brokerage, if you make it so that brokers have to share these documents. Now, let's make sure that we understand. It's already a law. 371.3 says that brokers have to share those documents, right? But it also doesn't say that I can't have a clause in my contract that says when we're doing business, we're not sharing our documents. If you're okay with that, we can work together. If not, we won't work together, right? I can have that clause in the contract. Some bigger brokerages do that, right? I have never had a carrier ask me for my transaction documents. That has never happened.
That's interesting.
I see that on social media, but that's never happened, right? So how I see it is, if you allow it and you make it so that, bam, at the end of a transaction, I automatically have to show these or send my documents to the carrier, I think that bigger brokerages are going to be okay. The reason why I say that is because they control way more freight than I do as a small freight brokerage.
Makes
right?
sense.
So they're not going to be really impacted by that, because whatever my rate was, my rate is. And because I control so much freight, either you're going to take it or you're going to leave it. Where it's going to hurt smaller freight brokers, in my thinking, just the way that I see it, is when we don't have as much market share. Truckers say, okay, they see that you're making X, and they say, we're just going to hold out, and we'll give him $200, or we'll give him $100. We're just going to wait out. We're just going to wait him out, right? So it will give a trucker, in my opinion, more leverage. It would make, to me, the playing field wouldn't be a fair playing field. It wouldn't be, basically, because this is how I see it. I don't have the luxury of going to the shipper and saying, hey, Mr. Shipper, I need to see what your rates are and what you've been paying carriers for the last 90 days. I don't get that luxury. I got to go in and negotiate with that shipper based off of what the market says that particular lane is going at. I got to come up with a number that works. So then what I have to do now is I got to share that number with carriers. And I just don't see that as being a fair playing game. I don't see that as being in the best interest of good competition. I don't see that as being in the best interest of that. That's just how I see it. It's how I see it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I'm thinking about a conversation that I was having with the carrier, and I think it was interesting what you shared a minute ago, how you believe that the ruling would impact small carriers, small brokers, potentially. I was speaking to a carrier the other day, and he acknowledged he's been a carrier for a long time, but he's like, man, this is a subject I don't know much about, but on the broker transparency issue in the recent rulings, he was thinking, and you straighten me out on this if I need to be straightened out. He was like, man, I don't think this is going to change much. And it's interesting because you just acknowledged that you believe that it will give the trucker more leverage. The trucker that I was talking to, the carrier that I was talking to, he's like, I don't think it's going to change much. He said, what I think is going to happen is And again, he acknowledged that he may not know how things work, but he's like, they will figure out some type of way around it. Brokers, he may have been talking about like mega brokers, but he was like, they'll find some way around it. And he gave a scenario where, maybe they'll start creating sister companies, and they'll do it in a way where still the carrier is not able to see the original rate from the shipper. They may be seeing the rate from the sister company, but still may not be able to see the rate from the shipper. And he was just like, I don't even know if it works like that, but he's like, it just makes sense to me that a way will be found to work around it. And just now you said you feel like it could actually work in favor for the carriers. The carrier I was speaking to didn't feel like the ruling would favor them carriers at all. So that's interesting to hear you give your perspective.
Now, I'm only saying that it will favor carriers when they're dealing with, or it could favor carriers when they're dealing with smaller freight brokers. As I said in the beginning, when we're talking to larger freight brokers, it's not going to make a difference, because that freight broker, when you're talking to TQL, when you're talking these bigger freight brokerages, they command more of the market. They got a whole lot of freight. So
they have the leverage already.
They already got the leverage.
Yes,
so that
I
number is
understand that.
So I don't think it's going to do much of anything to change how a broker operates. I don't think that, maybe they will do that sister company thing that he was talking about, but I don't even see them having to put that much effort in. If they want us to show the rates, we'll show the rates, but it's not going to change what their rate is. I don't see that.
I got you. I'm glad you clarified that. Yeah, because I think that's what carriers are expecting. They would hope to do this to give themselves more leverage, but it makes sense. Like okay, the rate was what it was, and now you're able to see it. It still ain't gonna change, though. I get what you're saying. So
it's still the rate. I mean, you got carriers right now that are saying, "Oh, okay, well, I know that this broker is making 65% on the load, but you still moving the load. The loads are still moving, right? So the loads aren't going to stop moving because now, okay, you get to see what the rate is. And what I wonder about it is what your partner was mentioning. Is will you really still be seeing a real rate? Will you still be, how do you know for certain that is the rate still?
That is what he was questioning, yes.
Right. So I just, like you said, they are always going to find a way around. That's why they got a lot of resources to be able to find their way around different rules.
Makes sense. Makes total sense. So, we talked earlier about, I was letting you know earlier when you were talking about unscrupulous parties on both sides of the transaction. And I let you know, look, bro, this conversation ain't about getting on truckers. It's about getting on brokers, right? So I did tell you I want to come back to that and give us a chance to get on carriers a little bit as well. So let me know, man, are there any beefs that you, speaking for brokers, have with carriers? You mentioned, like I said, things happening on the carrier side as well, as far as, carriers doing things they shouldn't be doing. Are there any beefs that you would like to air out to the carriers, to the owner operators that are going to watch this video, that you on the broker side will want to say, hey man, look, this is some areas that y'all may want to consider straightening up in? Is there any beefs that you have? We're talking about truckers beefs with you. Are there any beefs that you have with truckers?
Nah, none. I don't have any beefs. It's just about doing business, doing good business. But I think that it's good to understand the business that you're coming into. If I had to say, what I think, if my thoughts were worth much, I would say that understand what it is that you're coming into, what you're getting into. When I say sometimes to people, you should have an exit strategy when you come into any business. And I don't mean that to be facetious. I don't mean that in a way to try and make you feel small and me feel big. I'm saying that in truth and being real. You should have an exit strategy. For example, I follow my own advice. In that business, I told you I came in as a broker and a carrier, and I exited the carrier space once it was revealed to me, this is not what I thought it was. This is not going to be what I thought it would be. So I went a different direction. How I look at trucking, when I look at trucking in the grand scheme of things, just in how I see it, if you're coming into trucking to make a lot of money, keep a lot of money for yourself, then you might find that this is a business that's really going to challenge challenge you very, give you some serious challenges as that is concerned. Because when you really look at it, trucking to me is designed so that it is not the truck driver, it is not the owner operator who makes the money in the trucking industry. From what I can see, from where I sit, it is not the truck driver or the owner operator. Now, are these the people that do a lot of the back-breaking work, giving all of their time and effort to the truck, to the business, to getting those loads there on time? Absolutely, no doubt. There's no doubting that. But now, what I started to understand a little bit better, at least this is the understanding I developed, is not the truck driver who makes the money in this business. It's people who provide services to the truck driver who makes the money.
I get that.
I was like, whoa. So yeah, I get it. I understand. Truck drivers have some, so I understand how they feel when it comes down to what it is that they give and what they get in return. I understand how a truck driver, certain truck drivers, because what we have to also understand is some truck drivers are getting it. Some truck drivers are getting with the business. Some truck drivers are making money in this business, bro.
100%.
So let's not look at it like we're talking all truck drivers, because that's not the case. Some people actually know how to run a trucking business, bro, and they know what they're doing. So I'm not talking about all truck drivers, but you have a lot of truck drivers that just get in the truck to drive a truck and say, hey, I'm gonna make some money. And bro, that shit don't work. that don't work. that just doesn't work. So when I look at it, bro, I just say, man, as a truck driver, you want to come into this business and not necessarily look at it as long term, right? I would look at it in a shorter term so I can find out what I need to find out to make a decision to stay longer term, right? We come into it with, oh, I'm not going to quit, I'm going to stay with it. Yeah, you can stay with it for a period of time, but when you know that it's not doing what you expected to do, it's not producing the numbers that you expected to produce, there we come again with this exit strategy. It's okay to get out of a business when it's not turning the dollars that you thought it would turn. It's okay to do that. It's okay to go to something else. But when we just blindly stay in something and stay committed to it because we don't want to say we didn't make it, or we're afraid that people are going to chastise us because we didn't make it, or whatever it might be, we just want to hang on to say we're hanging on, to me, that's a big mistake.
I get it. I totally get that. Last question, Brandon. Are any of truck drivers, carriers, beefs with brokers valid? Some of the things that I hear. I was watching a video the other day, and the main thing the driver was talking about is the transparency issue, but he was also talking about how loads get posted to a load board. Like he mentioned the situation. Again, I'm ignorant on this subject, so I may use the wrong language or whatever. But he was talking about how loads sometimes get posted in a different location, like maybe 30, 40 minutes, an hour, or wherever. The load might be in 30, 45 minutes away from where the load actually posted. The same video was talking about delivery times being put in situations where the carrier thought the delivery was supposed to be there Friday. Come to find out when they get there, it's not supposed to be there till Monday. And for some reason, the carrier comes to the conclusion that the broker knew this up front. He was just expecting the carrier to just be willing to sit on the load. I heard this same video. The gentleman was talking about carriers or brokers giving carriers a hard time sometimes with detention pay and layover pay. There's a couple other things that he mentioned other than the broker transparency issue. Are any of these beefs that carriers / owners have with brokers, are any of them valid to any extent?
Yeah, especially what you just mentioned, right? Those are very legitimate gripes that some truck drivers have with freight brokers. If you remember when I first started, I said one of the things that I want to do is to make sure that I give the truck driver enough information, all of the information, so he can make a decision. He can make a decision in his own best interest, right? I'm going to give him the information now. I'm not going to hold back on information so that he'll accept the load. And then when he gets in a situation, it's something totally that he didn't expect. And I knew it was coming. For example, we have some facilities that we go to that we know will be extended. Time is going to be extended getting downloaded, right? We already know that going in because of the experiences that you've had going into that place. So what I will do is I will share that with a carrier. I say, hey man, last week we went in and it took 4 hours to get downloaded, right? I'm not saying it's going to be that way this week, but I just wanted to give you a heads up to let you know what happened, right? Because I don't know what that driver has coming after this load. This could be a $1,500 load. He could have a $3,500 load that he's picking up after me. And in order to get there, he got to be out of there on time. So I ain't going to play with his money like that, right? I don't do that, but you do, just like that person was sharing with you. You have brokers that will withhold information so that the carrier would take the load, especially when they're in a crunch, right? So those are legitimate gripes, not having enough information to make a good decision as far as taking a load is concerned. I agree with those gripes, and you should be given, the information to make a good decision. Now, the other side of it, when it comes down to detention, when it comes down to truck ordered not used. Now, I know those situations, I've heard people say they happen, right? But the part that I don't get is that you and I, as a broker, I'm going to send you out a contract prior to us getting set up, right? This is a setup contract. I'm going to send you out a contract and say, hey, this is the rules. This is how everything works, right? And in that agreement, I should have what my truck order not used pay is. I should have what my detention policy is, or you should request my detention policy if it's not there, so that you understand how detention works. But see, what happens is truck drivers, a lot of times, especially newer drivers, they'll wait till detention happens, and then they want to know, what's the detention policy? Oh, we don't have a detention policy. We don't pay detention, right? But you should have known that prior to accepting that load, based off of the contract, based off of you exercising, doing your own due diligence. Again, I put a lot of responsibility on business owners as truck drivers and as freight brokers. It's your responsibility to take care of your business. Another example, as a freight broker, I'm going to have in the special instructions. Sometimes I'm going to write specific things to cover my own butt in those special instructions. I'm going to make sure that every time I always mention what the temperature is if I'm hauling reefer freight, and that's in those special instructions. So I'm always covering my own butt, and I think that truck drivers should look to do the same.
Got it, man. Got it. Mr. Brandon Scott, I really appreciate you taking time to come and share your experiences with us here on the Helpful Trucker channel. And I want to wish you continued success, man, over there on your YouTube channel, in your real estate endeavors, and in your freight brokering endeavors. I honestly believe, I was being sincere when I said earlier that the community at large needs more people that are willing to share like yourself. So again, I appreciate you coming, being willing to spend time with us this morning.
Well, I also want to say, man, that I thank you so much for having me on your show. I really appreciate it. I've admired you from a distance for some time. I like your channel. I think that you're doing great things as well over there on that side of the house. I think that we need channels like yours so that truckers can see that it's about trying different things. It's not just about doing things one way all of the time. I like the fact that you have a different part of how you deal with trucking, right? You have a different way of doing it, but it works for you. The traditional model is not always the best model. Sometimes you might have to go out and make it work for you. And I like how you do that, my brother. And again, I thank you for having me on the channel. And hopefully we were able to provide some value to your listening audience.
Absolutely. Mr. Brandon Scott.